Are you a complete CAD noob? Well, that's perfect, because in today's tutorial, we will be learning how to design a box with a sliding lid in Fusion 360, no prior design experience required. This box requires no support and prints in a single piece. If this is your first time with Fusion 360, I recommend simply copying and not worrying too much about the details. They will come with time. Okay, before we get started designing in Fusion 360, we need to go over a few important concepts. Now, our design goal whenever we're designing an object that's going to be 3D printed, we want to avoid supports at all costs. Supports can leave a bad surface finish, like in this picture right here. They can be difficult to remove, and they also add to waste. If you're going to be printing an object many times, that waste will add up eventually. One technique we can use to avoid supports is called bridging, and it looks like this. Problems can be is that the longer bridges get, the more it can sag in the middle, like in this picture right here. Another technique we can use to get rid of supports is overhangs. And so in this picture, this is the surface that printed on the print bed, like shown right here. And then we have different degree marks. This is 45 degrees, 30 degrees, 20 degrees, 10 degrees. And a typical overhang allowable is around 30 to 45 degrees. That's going to depend on your printer, your layer height, your cooling settings, your printer, and more. But a typical value that I use that I try not to exceed is usually 30 degrees, because we can see that if we go any lower than that, then we kind of start getting a bad surface finish on the bottom side of our prints. Now, an important concept to grasp is print orientation. So whenever we're 3D printing something, not all directions are equal. Whenever we're designing parts, they usually fail at the layer lines where like one layer of material was put down and then the next layer was put down on top of that. It'll fail at that seam. So I have a quick question. What direction do you think we should print this part in for maximum strength? Should we put this on the bottom, this on the build plate, or the long edge on the build plate? Now, if you said print in this orientation, then you'd be correct, and this is not ideal. Printing it standing up like this for maximum strength, and that's because if we were to like just say bend this with our fingers, then this part would be a lot stronger because we have these continuous fibers running along the entire length, and we have multiple layers of these continuous fibers. Whereas for this model, we have a bunch of layer lines separating, going vertical. And so if we're to bend it, it would be a lot easier to break the individual layer lines together rather than however many layers this is of straight continuous fibers. All right, so now let's actually get started with designing our box. So I'm going to be designing my box for a mask, like a face mask, and the internal dimensions, or like the dimensions of the mask that I'm using when I fold it up really tight are 1.5 inches by 2.5 inches by 0.62 inches. So the first thing we're going to do is go to change parameters and actually put this into parameters. So we're going to do the length, 2.5, width, 1.5, and height is 0.62. Oops. Height is 0.62. And there's a few more parameters we're going to want to put in. We're going to want to put in our wall thickness of the box. So we're just going to type in wall T. That's going to be 0.15 inches. And then the last important parameter is our tolerance. So this is going to change depending on your printer. Some printers will have a tighter tolerance, some printers will have looser tolerance. Also depends on a few other factors, but a good place to start is 0.015. We're going to hit OK. Okay, so now we're going to click on Create Sketch. Click on that face and start with a rectangle. So we're going to want to dimension this rectangle now. So we can either click on this button, Sketch Dimension, or hit D. So now we're going to want to put in our length value, which is 2.5 inches. So we could type 2.5, but we want this associated to our parameters. So we're just going to type in length. Hit enter. And this little FX symbol shows up. That just means that it's associated with like an equation or something, because you could also add operations into this field. But we're just going to do width. Hit enter, and that's good. So now we want to add our wall thickness. So we just double click on that to highlight the rectangle, and then we click offset, and we're going to type in wall T for our wall thickness. Click finish sketch, and now we're going to extrude this into 3 dimensions, and we're going to do height. So the height of our thing. And this is where I said you could do operations. We're going to do plus, hit the plus sign, 2 times our wall thickness, because we're going to have to add a top and a bottom eventually. Operation set to new body, and hit OK. Okay, now we're going to add the top. So we're going to click sketch and click on the top face. So we could just like draw a rectangle on here, but I like to use project and intersect. And if you don't have the tools right here, if you want to add it to your quick toolbar, you just go under create, project, and these 3 little dots will show up. You click on that and you click pin to toolbar. And we're going to do that for project and intersect, because those are very useful tools. So we're going to project this top face into our sketch, and that highlights all the edges. We'll just click finish sketch. And now we're going to want to extrude this profile by our wall thickness. And you see it's going the wrong direction. To flip the direction of the extrude, we just add a negative sign. And you see the operation switch to join. That's because it's going downwards and wants to join with our body now. So we hit OK. And now let's add the bottom lid now. So we're going to click create sketch, and we're going to click on this front face. Okay, so we want these 2 edges to be a part of our sketch so that we know where the wall is. So that's why the project tool is so useful, because we can just click on these edges and you see it projects it into our sketch. To look at our sketch again, we just right click, look at. That makes the view normal. So we're going to add in a rectangle right here, and we hit D. This distance is our wall thickness. And now we also want to add an offset so that our lid can slide in the box nicely. So we're just going to click, or we're going to type tall for our tolerance. Hit OK, click finish sketch. Okay, so we're going to want to extrude this outside profile and everything else. Extent, we can click to objects because we want it to extrude all the way to this wall. Set the operation to cut, then hit OK. Now we want to add our lid as well, so we're going to have to click the eyeball on the sketch to show it again, and then click extrude, and then the center profile is what we're going to want to extrude this time, and then extent to objects. And we're going to want this operation set to a new body because this lid is going to be separate from the box. It's going to print and place together, but we don't want it to be the same body. It's going to be a new part. So we have it set the extent to this face right now, but we want to offset that by our tolerance value. So you can see now it doesn't go quite all the way. And hit OK. And we can hide that sketch. So we have our box and our lid right now. It's generally a good idea to make these separate components. So we're going to click on one body and click create component from bodies. Do the same thing for the next one. And right now I have component color cycling toggle on. So to get to that, just click on inspect, and it basically just adds color to your parts. That way you can kind of tell the difference between the separate parts. It's very handy. Now we're gonna add like the little track or the rails for the lid to slide on in the box. Okay, so to add the little like railings for this lid to slide on within the box, we're going to create a new sketch within the top level design. And just hit escape if you want to exit out of any tools. And you see now that I've created components, we can activate them. Like generally, if you're going to make a feature or a sketch that is associated with both the components, then you would want to do it in the top level design. But say if you're going to like add just something small, something minor to only one of the components, and that's when you would want to activate the components and do it within the component level. So we're going to click sketch, front face, and now we're going to add the little railings for this to go on. Something like that. Now I'm going to create a center line. To do that, you just hover over the line until you get that little marker, that triangle. And then we're going to click on construction because we don't want to extrude this line or anything. We just want to use it for help making the sketch. So we're going to hit D, dimension this to 40 degrees. Remember that the overhang value we talked about, we don't want to go below 30 degrees. 40 degrees that's what we want to use right now though. So we're going to make these equal. I just held control, clicked on both of them, and then hit this equal button right here. So now we're going to add the offset. So just double click and then click offset. Oh, we didn't select this line as well. Then click offset. And this set to tall. And then we want to project this line right here. And now we're going to mirror this. So we just click mirror, and then we click on our two profiles. Mirror line, and then you see the preview shows up, and now it mirrors all of this sketch geometry across this midplane, or this mid center line that we made earlier. Now we'll click finish. So now we'll go and activate. Let's actually name these. This is going to be our lid, and this is our box. So in order to name those, I just slow double clicked. Once to highlight, and then another time to rename it. So we click extrude. We want to extrude this profile. Oh, sorry, before we do that, we want to activate this, because this is going to be a part of the lid. So click extrude, this profile, that profile, to object, and we want it up to this face. And the way that I'm the way that I'm moving the camera like this, I'm just holding the middle scroll wheel to rotate, and then I hold Control and the middle scroll wheel button to pan like this. You can also use these tools down here. Okay, so we're gonna activate the box now, and we want to show the sketch again because we're going to use it again. And extrude. We're going to extrude that. And then extent to object. And so it's kind of hard for me to choose this back face. So I can hold left click, and that'll allow me to choose things that are hidden, because that's the face I want. We set the operation to cut, and then we make sure that we only want to cut the box, so we uncheck the lid and hit OK. We'll go ahead and activate our top level design again, and there's our box, starting to take shape. So before we keep working, there's a bit of cleanup we need to do. So if you notice, this face is offset. There's this gap right here, and we have this face that's kind of protruding slightly just from that cut operation. So what we're going to want to do to make this flush, we can go to press pull and select on that face, hold Control, select that face, and then we're going to type in our tolerance. Then hit negative in order to push it back. And now you see we push that face back so that it's flush. Here, if to view your changes, you can just drag this on the timeline. So that's how it was before. That's how it is now. That'll print a lot better like that. So we'll show this again. Okay, so the next thing that we're gonna want to add is the clip that keeps the lid closed to the box when it's closed. So that way it just doesn't slide off on its own. So the first thing we're gonna do is add a midplane. So in order to do that, we go under construction, midplane, and this will just add a plane in between, like basically in the middle of our box if we select the two outer faces. So now in order to see our sketch easier, because we're going to want to sketch on this plane, we're going to go to Inspect, Section Analysis, and then we're going to click on this face in order to better see our sketch, because we're going to create a sketch on here in a sec. In order to turn this section view off, you just click this little eyeball right here under Analysis. Okay, so now let's start our sketch here. So we're going to want to, this time we're going to want to intersect. Project would include, so like for instance, if I clicked on this face, I only want the line of where this face intersects my sketch. I don't need like these 3 points right here. So that's why I would use project, but if I Control Z that, and if I instead use project, it adds all these points here where you can see where these are from, but I don't really need that. So that's why I'm going to use intersect for this instance. I'm actually going to intersect this face and this face. Okay, I'm going to open my sketches and right click, look at, to make the view normal to again. Okay, so now I'm gonna start this off in the midpoint, and then draw something that looks something like this. I'm gonna add an arc, 3-point arc. Something like that. And I'm gonna add this bottom line. And now we have this basic little profile that's gonna clip into the box. So now let's dimension it. I want this to be 0.02. So what I'm going to do, I want this line to be half of this line's length. So what I'm going to, there's multiple ways to do that, but one way I'm going to do it is by adding a point. So we have point right here. It's pretty useful, so I'm going to pin it to the toolbar. And so you see we hover over it until we get that little triangle. That means it's in the midpoint of this line. So now I'm going to select that point, and make those vertical. And that'll make this line half the length of this. Okay, now just a few more things. We're going to want hold control. We're going to want these to make these tangent. So just click on it like that. And now everything is black, which means it's fully defined. Just drag things if you're not sure if it's defined, and if it is, then it won't move. So we're going to click Finish Sketch. We're going to hide the box. And now we're going to extrude this profile. So now since this is the midplane, we're going to click Direction Symmetric. And we're going to make this 0.5 inches long. So right now we have whole length selected, or half length selected, so that means half of the entire length would be 0.5 inches. But we want the whole thing to be 0.5 inches, so we click on this whole length option. Make sure it's set to join. We can unselect the section view to see what it'll fully look like. That looks good. So now we need this part of the lid to be flexible. And right now it's obviously not going to flex. So we need to add a few features in order to make this part able to flex out enough like this way, so that when it's slid into the box, this part will flex down and then it'll clip in place. So to do that, we're going to extrude. Actually, we're going to sketch on this top face. We're going to make sure that the lid is active too. So sketch on this face. We're just going to make this rectangle and then cut it out because we need the part of basically like this little flap to be thinner. So I'm going to click on that edge and hold Control. And I want those two lines to be collinear. I'm going to do the same on this side. And I want this distance to be 1 inch. I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. And now we want to cut this sketch right here up to this face. So extent to object, operation cut, and we only want to cut our lid. Okay, so now we need to we only want this to be attached right here. So we're going to create another sketch on here. We're going to create a center line because we're going to, doesn't really matter how long your center line is, because we're going to make this value our tolerance. Hit enter. And double click on that newly created rectangle, and then we're going to want to mirror that like that, and finish sketch. Now we're going to extrude these two profiles all the way through. So now we have this little flap that will kind of be a bit more flexible. In order for this to not break, we're also going to want to add a fillet right here. So in order to do that, we click on fillet. We're just going to click on that edge right there. See what like a 0.1 inch fillet. That looks good. And we'll just hit OK. Okay, so we're going to show that and activate the top level component, or the top level design. So now we need to add the cutout now for basically the box. So we can hide our lid now. We're going to want to show the sketch again because we're going to want to use this for our next sketch. We can reselect our section view, and we're going to want to create a new sketch. We can show our plane in order to select it. Click on create sketch on the mid plane, and if you wanted to, you could even name this mid plane. Okay, so this is the profile that we extruded before as part of the lid. So now we're going to want to create a cutout. So we're going to intersect this face and this face. And so we're going to basically want to do the opposite. Going to create an arc. So now we have this now we have this profile. So now we're going to want to add our tolerance values. So we're going to have to add a few points. You see we can't really add a point yet because it's part of another sketch, but what we can do is we can project that other sketch in order to get it into the current one. Now we can hide it. Now we have the outline of that previous sketch. We're gonna want to add a point right here, because we're gonna want to dimension this to be our tolerance. We don't actually need that line because what we're trying to cut out is this profile underneath. Okay, so I think that looks good. Everything is fully constrained. We can't drag any points. So that means it's good. We're going to click Finish Sketch. And we're going to make sure box is activated. And then we're going to extrude this profile. We're going to do the whole length. We're going to do, actually what we can do is make that 0.5 inches, the same as before. But then we also need to add plus our 2 times our tolerance. We want to make sure just the box we're cutting. So cool. That's kind of how that latch will look like. So that when it's slid out, this part will kind of flex and bend out of the way and then snap back in place once it's on the other side. And if you move things around, you want to put them back into where they were, you just click on Revert under Position up here. Okay, so now I can hide that section view. You see we got the clip right there. Now, when we did this cut earlier, you notice that this distance from here to this wall is kind of thin. If we click on Inspect Measure, and click on this point, and then click on this face, it'll show us that it's only 0.037 inches. And that's kind of thin, and it might break at that point, so we want to thicken up that area a bit. So this is going to be part of the box feature, so we can activate that component. We can hide this even, and we're going to create a sketch. So what we want to do is add thickness to this region right here. So what we can do is something like this. And we want this and this to be parallel. We want this and this to be parallel. So now you can see we have control over it like this way. And then we want to control this minimum distance right here. We don't want that to be too thin. So we're going to set that to 0.1 inches. You can see we just have just this left to define. We're going to want to make this and this coincident so that this point lies on this line, and that'll fully define our sketch. So we're going to want to do the same thing on the other side. So what you can just do is create a center line, make it construction, and then mirror it. Finish sketch. And now we're going to extrude this profile and that profile all the way to the end. So cool. Now we beefed up that section right there, and our box won't break there. Okay, so there's a few more things that we need to do. You don't have to do this, but something that I like to do is to assemble these parts together so I can kind of see how they'll move. So in order to do that, under assemble, there's joints and as-built joints. You're going to want to use as-built joints whenever the parts are already where they're supposed to be, and use joint otherwise. So we're going to use as-built joint. We want these two to slide relative to each other. So we're going to click our two components, and we're going to click slider. And then for the snap, we're just going to click the front face. There we go. I don't know. I was doing that before. And then to animate it, we can click on preview joint motion. And that's how we want it to move. So now whenever we try and drag this, oops, yeah, see, we don't want to do that. So what we want to do, we want to fix our box first. So we can right click and then click on ground. So that way we can't drag the orange box. We only want to be able to drag this part. So now it moves kind of like how it's going to in real life. In order to hide this little joint symbol, we just go under joints and hide that. And then we want to also revert this position back to where it was. Okay, cool. Just a few more details that we need to add before our box is done. So right now, the lid can't slide this way because this face is going to hit it. But it can just slide off the rails this way. So we need to add something in order to address that. And what I like to do, what I'm going to do in this situation, I'm going to add little kind of like Mickey Mouse ears right here that are going to catch on the inside of the box to prevent it from coming out. So that'll look a little something like this. We'll start a sketch on this face. We'll hover until this is in the midpoint like that. And we'll create a circle that's 0.075 inches. 0.075 inches. And then we're going to want to offset that as well for our tolerance. Then create a center line. What we can do is click on project. Go back to our sketch and right click, look at. Now we can dimension to that line. Doesn't matter how long it is. We're just going to mirror it. You just want to make sure that it's vertical. There, like that. So now we want to activate our lid. And we want to extrude the inner profile by our wall thickness. And opposite direction, so we're going to add negative. That's good. So now we want to show that sketch again. We're going to hide the lid and show the box. We're also going to make sure to activate the component box. And now we're going to extrude this. So choose the full sketch now. And we're going to want to extrude this in two directions because you see it's not quite on this face. So for the first side, for the extent, we're going to click to object. We're going to extrude all the way up to this face. And for the second direction, we're going to extrude up to this face. So you see that'll block it, the lid from coming out off the rails now. I'm going to go ahead and activate this again. Can hide the sketch. And so in order to kind of see like kind of what's going on the inside of your part, you can go to display settings, visual style, and you could do shaded with hidden edges, and that'll show the inside of the part, or kind of like the edges that you can't see from the outside. So you see we have the back of the Mickey Mouse ears back there, and we can see that it'll hit that front face. It'll probably be easier to see if we activate this too. So you see there's our little Mickey Mouse ear, and it'll hit right there, and that'll stop the lid from coming off the rails in the forward direction. Okay, cool, we're almost done. Just a few more things. We're gonna want to add some type of thumb cranny into the lid in order to be able to open it. So that's pretty simple. We're just gonna activate the lid. We're gonna create a sketch on this front plane, and then start by creating a center line. And now we'll create a circle, like a cutout for a thumb. We'll dimension this to 0.5 inches. And we want this to cut out like this semicircle, so about like, we want this to go halfway in. So we can dimension that using construction by just creating this line right here. Make sure it's for construction, and we can just click on this circle and this line and make it tangent, and that will fully define this profile. We'll click finish sketch, and now we want to extrude this, but we don't want it to start at the very front face. So what we can do is offset the start. Well, we can offset it by like 0.5, the direction. But we want to make sure to select this profile too. Maybe 0.5. Make sure it's set to cut. We have our offset opposite as well. So you're going to hit negative. We have our distance opposite as well, so we're going to hit negative right there. So it'll look like that. Make sure objects to cut is just the lid. Hit OK. So now we have our little thumb indent that we can pull the lid off of the box with. And now we're almost done. We just need to add fillets. So we're going to go and activate the top level. And we're going to add fillets because these can be sharp corners. So we're going to click the fillet tool. We could click like all 4 of these edges, or you could just click the face. See what 0.1 looks like. We're going to want to add it to, by the way, if you just hold control, it'll unactivate the fillet so you can kind of preview it. If you want to select additional edges, you you hold control and you select the edge, but like sometimes it'll give you slightly weird results. So you just kind of play with it till you get all the sharp edges in your model. We'll select this face. So if you notice, if it doesn't give you a preview, then that means whatever you selected is causing errors. So then that's when you would want to unselect it. We'll select this back face. You see it's not, I let go of control and it's giving me errors, so I either need to decrease this fillet value, it's like 0.05, and now it'll solve. So I think that's probably what I'll do. See what happens when I select these faces now. You see it's giving me an error, so it's this face that's causing me problems. I'll just select. Oh, now that's giving me problems. Okay, we'll unselect that. We'll just do that for now. It's pretty often that you need to do multiple fillet operations. If you go back to edit feature, maybe if we just select these edges, then I'll be more happy. There we go. No, it doesn't like that edge. Okay, so we can add more different sized fillets by just clicking this add selection set, because we're going to want to fillet this and this sharp edge to like 0.01. You don't have to copy this part exactly. Also, you can do your own fillets. You might need to hide some parts in order to fillet some of these parts, but this looks good. You generally don't want to fillet things on the bottom, on the build plate, or the edges that are on the build plate, because you want some good contact. I think what I'm going to do is add a chamfer. To add a chamfer, you just go to modify, chamfer. I want to chamfer this edge and this edge. I think something like that looks good. We'll change this to distance angle so we could adjust the angle. Yeah, like that. Something like that looks good. And the reason we want that is when this slides in, these corners could get caught, so we want a wider opening, just so it works well. We'll click revert, and I think this is looking pretty done. I think this is good now. So in order to actually 3D print your new creation, first thing we're going to want to do is save this. So I have like this practice file already set up in my projects, but you'll probably just have, if this is your first time using Fusion 360, you'll just have admin project, default project. You can add in a new project by just clicking like that. I already made one called learning, and then I created this new folder called practice, and here's all of my practice and tutorial files. So I just saved this as tutorial 1. And so now that we have, now we saved it. So now what we want to do is save this as a file format that is 3D printable. In order to do that, we right click and go down to save as STL. Then we have this little dialog pop up. We want this one file. Refinement, set it to high. Don't worry too much about those options. Oh, before we do that, whenever it outputs an STL, it uses millimeters as default. So if your units are set to inches, you're going to have to change it to millimeters before you export. It's a big pain in the butt, but it's what you have to do in order to get your file the right size. So you're going to set the units to millimeter, and then right click, save as STL, and then OK. And we'll just save this as tutorial 1 and save it somewhere where you can remember. Okay, so now we're in our 3D printer slicer. I use Prusa slicer, but you might use Cura or something else. So we're gonna add our new part. We're gonna want to make sure that it's oriented like this, because this is the way it's designed to be printed. A few notes about printing is you're going to want to make sure that your first layer distance is correct, because if the first layer is too close, it can squish the first layer together, and then it'll mess up this distance right here and your parts confuse. If you're having a lot of issues with that, there's also elephant foot settings that you can mess around with. Or you might also have to change your tolerance value that we established in the parameters if your 3D printer is fairly inaccurate. So this actually needs no supports, so we're going to click no supports. And then now we have a preview. And so we're just going to go and double check and make sure that none of the parts get fused during printing. So I just like to do that by going layer by layer. Everything looks good there. I want to make sure that this bridge that comes over doesn't get too close. Yeah, it's a few layers above, so that's fine. And that's fine as well. So yeah, I think that'll do it. If you enjoyed this tutorial, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out a lot to grow this YouTube channel. I'll try and come up with more tutorials for you guys. The goal is that after every week we'll have something to 3D print, so that way after each session of your hard work you'll have a physical item to be proud of. Thank you so much. Bye bye.